What's going on, Johnny Nation? Welcome to episode 196 of the Eye of the Storm podcast. My name is David Barov, and March Madness is here. That's right. Your St. John's Red Storm are going dancing, and it's the most exciting time of the year. Forget about work. Forget about anything else. Forget about all your other responsibilities. There's nothing that can simply matter more right now than the tournament. My goodness, we have been counting down the days for ever since November, since that first week of November, and we are here. You have a bracket. You've probably been filling out and tinkering with that bracket nonstop. And it's time to get to the games. St. John's is in the tournament. That's right. They are back-to-back Big East champs. They are back-to-back Big East tournament champions, and they are in the NCAA tournament as a 5 seed. We are going to get to that in just a minute. We have to talk about a few things before we get to previewing the Northern Iowa Panthers versus the St. John's Red Storm. That will be on Friday night, 7:10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you are traveling to San Diego, make sure you set that watch of yours back 3 hours. That game is at 4:10 p.m. That's in San Diego. They're going to be playing where the San Diego Aztecs play. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be interesting, and we'll certainly preview that game coming up. But I have a few things to get off my chest. I have a few things to rant about, and let's get to it. Because right now, as we get ready for the NCAA tournament, as we get ready for the game on Friday, there's just some housekeeping to take care of. St. John's is making its 31st NCAA tournament appearance. All right. They are back-to-back outright regular season champs. They are back-to-back tournament champs in the Big East. They were the top seed in the Big East tournament. They won their 5th tournament championship. They won all 3 games by double digits. They have won 19 of 20 games going into Selection Sunday. And yet somehow they ended up with a 5 seed. Now, I'm going to go on a quick little rant here, and let me preface all of this, and I'm going to say it again later. It doesn't matter. Everything that I say right now doesn't matter. It's not going to change things, but there's a level of disrespect that's happening right now to the St. John's Red Storm that needs to get changed. And we need to talk about it. And somebody at the Big East offices, whether it's Val Ackerman or somebody else, needs to start doing something to protect this conference from the level of disrespect that it's happening. You know, Purdue wins its championship, and it seems to get weighed a little bit more. St. John's runs roughshod through UConn. Not much gets done about it. So let's talk about this 5 seed, because that's what everybody has been talking about. St. John's as a 5 seed instead of a 4. Some people were talking about possibly being a 3. Now, you heard Brad Wachtel on this podcast on Selection Sunday early in the morning. He said that he thinks the committee is going to give him a 5. He said he personally would put him at a 4. Now, I don't think anybody really thought they would get to a 3. I saw some people say that they should based on how they were playing, but the consensus was 4. And instead, they were actually the 18th team by the committee in rank. So they weren't even the top 5 seed. They were the second 5 seed. And that put them all the way out west. So let's just talk about this. On Selection Sunday, I went with my wife and daughter to Carnesecca Arena. And we went to watch the Johnnies get placed in the tournament with the rest of Johnny's Nation. We wanted to have some fun. We wanted to be part of the pomp and circumstance. Johnny Thunderbirds dancing around. We got Chuck on the PA, and, everybody's having a good time. The CBS selection show starts, and we're watching the big screen in Carnesecca Arena, and the screen freezes on Hofstra. And everybody's sitting there like, whoa, because they said the St. John's Red Storm as the 5 seed. And then all of a sudden we saw Speedy Claxton and Cruz Davis and the Hofstra Pride were stuck on the screen. So all of us in the arena are like going crazy. We're thinking St. John's is playing Hofstra, the 5 seed versus the 12, Queens versus Long Island. Oh my gosh, what a fun storyline. But it was a Wi-Fi glitch or a CBS glitch, and that fun storyline didn't come to fruition. And of course, nothing goes smoothly when it's in St. John's, and that's just how it goes, but c'est la vie. I also think it also led to like a subdued reaction by the team and the players, and especially us in the arena, because it was like this pause. And anyway, apparently Northern Iowa didn't see its game versus St. John's announced either on the CBS viewing, so they didn't even have a reaction anyway. But let's get to the bigger point. St. John's, the 5 seed, going out west to San Diego, over 2,500 miles away from campus to play 12 seed Northern Iowa. Frankly, I'm more pissed off about them going to San Diego than playing Northern Iowa as the 5 seed. You know, I get it, and you're going to hear me. I get it about the 5 seed and the versus the 4 seed, but like to go to San Diego is crazy. There is not going to be a lot of St. John's fans going there. I most likely am not going to that game. It is very difficult to logistically get there on such a travel with the work week and things like that, to go 5 hours by plane, 5 hours back potentially. It's a lot. But let's just look at the numbers really quick. St. John's was given a 5 seed by the committee. Their net was 16. 17 in Ken Palm, 15 in Torvik, 10 in KPI. Evan Maya had him at 12. They should have been a 4. Now, the 4 and 5 may not have a huge difference to some, but the way the committee favors the first 40 days of the season over the last 65 needs to change. In this NIL and transfer portal era where you're dealing with new rosters and so much turnover, guys, it takes time to gel. We heard Rick Pitino say that all year. And yeah, I know we were kind of like annoyed, kept hearing that, and is it an excuse and an excuse? No, he's a Hall of Fame coach for a reason. That's why we saw him get this team to where it's at now. That's why this team is absolutely on fire right now. So as a whole, this St. John's fan base, I totally understand. And I'm one of you guys. So like, listen, I totally get it. There's disappointment, there's frustration. And especially when you saw that 5 seed come out, you were like, how, why? And you're starting to do all these computations in your head. Everybody's pulling up the metrics and they're like, how the hell is this team a 5 instead of a 4? Now, this fan base is passionate. They're fiercely loyal. And obviously there's a bias when it comes to us fans talking about the team, right? We try to be realistic, but there has to be an inherent bias. Most of us fans do understand that the committee looks at the total body of work. That means that, yes, you do have to favor what's going on at the start of the season as well as the end. My thing is, I understand that beating Ole Miss and Baylor does nothing to erase losing to Alabama and Iowa State, even though it was by 1, or Auburn or Kentucky. I get it. The disappointment with the fan base, I think more so, is that it's clear that the committee did not give 2 shits about St. John's beating UConn the way that it did in the Big East tournament title game. It did not care. It just didn't, because you can't sit here and tell me that St. John's did what it did in the Big East tournament, beating Providence, Seton Hall, and UConn the way that they did, and it wasn't taken into account. Further, it clearly did not care that St. John's was winners of 19 of 20 games going into March Madness. They didn't care. That has to change. There has to be some shift in the way that the process works, and I don't know how you actually have to calibrate it, but you have to weigh how a team is playing. And the fact is that you're going to weigh what happens in November and the first half of December more than what's going on in January, February, and March is crazy. I understand that you have to win your non-conference games. I understand that you have to schedule a certain way, and I understand that you have to take care of business. St. John's didn't do that. They were 9-5 to start the year. They had some pretty tough losses. You know, the 1-point loss to Iowa State, the bad loss to Auburn in Las Vegas, the Kentucky disappointment where Jaden Quaintance and Jalen Lowe played in the second half. You know, all these things. The Providence loss at home, that was a tough one. But again, that shouldn't overshadow how well St. John's played finishing up the season. 19 of 20 to go into the NCAA tournament. That's pretty crazy. I think that that's just something that needs to really be looked at. And obviously the second part is like the St. John's fans are pissed off because getting to San Diego was really tough. The whole conversation leading up to Selection Sunday was like, all right, if we beat UConn, check, then we're probably going to get a 4 seed. And that's likely going to put them in Philadelphia. At worst, if they didn't get to Philadelphia, they were going to go to Tampa. And even then we thought, okay, if St. John's gets a 5 seed, we're going to go to Tampa. It's a lot easier to get to Florida than it is to San Diego. So it's a logistical nightmare. It's a travel nightmare. I think there's only going to be like 300 St. John's fans there, honestly. So, Johnny Nation, if you are going, kudos to you. Be loud as hell, man. Cheer for the rest of us who are not there because, damn it, we want to be. I know it. Coach Pitino said that he feels the same way. He feels that the fans are not going to be able to be there. But listen, the fact is that this program, this Red Storm team, did so well at the end of the year. They made a statement. They won everything. They did what they had to do. They put a stranglehold on this conference. You heard John Fanta at the end of the Big East tournament. The Big East Conference runs through Queens. The Big East Conference runs through St. John's. St. John's is the king of the Big East Conference now, this year, and moving forward. It's not UConn. It's St. John's. No team in the last 25 plus years has swept their conference regular season and conference tournament championships and received less than a 3 seed. But St. John's did. Why? Well, I laid it out. They're probably going to weigh all the non-conference stuff. But it's crazy that, woe is me, it happens to St. John's again. I get it. The non-conference wins matter. The Big East only had 3 teams go into the tournament. St. John's beat Villanova twice and beat UConn twice. The goalposts seem to move a little bit too much for my liking. There's nothing you can do about what I just said. It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is Northern Iowa on Friday. But it still is annoying. It is frustrating. Things need to change. You can't sit here all year and tell me the metrics matter. You can't sit here all year and tell me that I need to have my spreadsheets. I need to be doing X, Y, and Z. I need to win by X amount. I need to do this, and this. And St. John's metrics were awesome all year. And at the end of the day, you get shafted. It's really frustrating. But again, it doesn't matter. St. John's is the 5 seed. They're going out west to San Diego. We're going to preview that game in just a bit. But one more piece of housekeeping. Today was announced that the Associated Press was having their All-American teams. Well, early in the morning, those teams were announced. First team, Cameron Boozer of Duke, J.T. Toppin of Texas Tech, Yaxel Lendeborg of Michigan, A.J. DeBonsa of BYU, and Darius Acuff from Arkansas. No arguments there. You're seeing a bunch of lottery picks in there. Second team, Caleb Wilson of North Carolina, Joshua Jefferson of Iowa State, Keaton Wagler of Illinois, Jeremy Fears, Michigan State, Braden Smith, Purdue. All right, another really solid second team list. The third team, Graham Ike of Gonzaga, Thomas Huff of Florida, Christian Anderson of Texas Tech, LeBaron Philon from Alabama, and Kingston Flemings from Houston. Whose name didn't I just call? Don't all buzz in at once. Zuby Ejiofor was not named to any of the All-American teams. It's bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. Zuby was named to the AP All-American Honorable Mentions with Michael Ajayi from Butler, Jaden Bradley from Arizona, Braden Burries from Arizona, Ruben Chinyelu from Florida, PJ Haggerty from Kansas State, Ibuka Okori from Stanford, Darren Peterson from Kansas, Bennett Sturtz from Iowa, Tyler Tanner from Vanderbilt, and Bruce Thornton from Iowa State. Zuby Ejiofor was snubbed. First, he's left off the Wooden Award watch list. And now, after winning the Big East Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, the Big East Tournament's Dave Gavitt Most Outstanding Player of the Year, a.k.a. the MVP of the tournament, while leading St. John's to another Big East Conference win and a Big East Tournament title, he gets snubbed again. It's bullshit. On February 17th, St. John's metrics guru and king of our numbers, Jason Fortin, tweeted the case for Zuby. And then a month later, Zuby got even better. In the Big East Tournament final against UConn, Zuby Ejiofor had 18 points, 9 rebounds, 7 blocks, 3 steals, and went 7 for 11 from the field. During the Big East Tournament, he averaged 19.7 points per game, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 4 blocks, 1.3 steals per game, and won the Most Outstanding Player of the Year in the tournament. Over the final 6 games of the season, St. John's went and dominated the rest of the way. Zuby, 20 points per game, was shooting over 67% from the field, 4.2 assists per game, 3.3 blocks per game, 1.3 steals per game. Over the last, hold your horses. Everybody sit down for what I'm about to tell you here. Here we go. Ready? Over the last 6 games of the season, Zuby Ejiofor scored over 100 points, had over 40 rebounds, over 25 assists, over 25 stocks, that's steals and blocks, and shot over 60% from the field and did not lose. The last person, get this, the last person in Division I college basketball or the NBA, that's right, we're factoring in the pros too, to do that over a 6-game span was some guy named Shaq. Shaquille O'Neal did that for the Lakers from November 12th to November 24th in 2000. How about that for a stat? In the 32-point bounce back win over Villanova after St. John's lost by 32 to UConn, Zuby Ejiofor had 16 points, 12 rebounds, and 10 assists. When St. John's needed to respond and really needed to get themselves off the mat, when everybody was kicking them and saying that they were down right after they got taken to the woodshed by UConn, people were starting to doubt them. Who showed up? Zuby Ejiofor showed up. He recorded just the 5th triple-double in program history since 1985. Zuby Ejiofor won preseason player of the year. He won the player of the year, the most outstanding player of the Big East tournament, defensive player of the year, scholar athlete of the year. He was the only unanimous all Big East first team selection, one of 2 unanimous all Big East all defensive selections, and was of course, an all Big East tournament team selection. I don't get it. It's nonsense. He was snubbed. It's you know why it's frustrating? Because St. John's deserves it and Zuby deserves it. The accolades, the recognition, propping this program up has been on the back of Rick Pitino and Zuby Ejiofor. So he deserves his flowers. He deserves his accolades. He deserves all of this. He deserves to get his trophies. He deserves to have an entire room in his house dedicated to his outstanding career at St. John's. But it's okay. Not really, but it's okay. Because now it's fuel. Now it's fuel for the fire. Not that Zuby needs any kind of extra motivation. I can tell you that. I can guarantee you that. But Rick Pitino and his staff are simply going to just use it as fuel. The rest of this team is going to use it as fuel. 5 seed, fuel. Zuby not getting All-American, fuel. You don't want to call him a first-round pick? Cool, fuel. So what do? You pull him aside right before the Northern Iowa game. In the locker room, you sit him down and say, I guess they don't think much of you. Honorable mention. Honorable mention. You couldn't make the team. They didn't think you were one of the top 15 players in the country. Okay. It's the biggest stage of their sport. It's March Madness, national TV. The entire world is watching with their brackets in their hands. Number 24 in the red and white. Go show them what an All-American looks like. Go show them. Go show them what we all know. That you're an All-American. And you're one of the best players in the world. Go show them. I guarantee you start to see that on Friday as St. John's gets ready to play Northern Iowa. All right, let's get to it. It's the Northern Iowa Panthers. That's who's playing St. John's on Friday. It is the number 5 St. John's Red Storm and the number 12 Northern Iowa Panthers. This is actually, fun fact, the second time that Rick Pitino will be coaching against Northern Iowa in the NCAA Tournament. He did so before in 2015. When he led the Louisville Cardinals to a 66-53 win over a UNI team that won 31 games that year. That win got Louisville to the Sweet 16. All right. So St. John's fans, Red Storm fans, if you haven't been locked in on the Missouri Valley Conference, you may remember the Purple and Gold Panthers from the 2010 NCAA Tournament. I'm going to say a name and you're going to go, oh, wow, I remember that guy. You remember Ali Farouknamesh? Well, Ali Farouknamesh is in highlights forever with the NCAA Tournament because of that big three that he hit right on top of Kansas's head to knock off the 1 seed Kansas Jayhawks and send UNI to the Sweet 16. Certainly something that I have never, ever, ever forgotten. I'm sure you haven't either. Go pull up the YouTube clip and watch it a few times. I know you're going to love that. Fun fact, Ali Farouknamesh, where's he at now? Well, he's actually coaching. He is the head coach of the Colorado Rams. All right, let's get into the game. Here's what we got to know. I'm going to get you guys ready, what you got to watch for. Now, before you say, hey, Dave, why are we spending so much time getting ready for Northern Iowa? It's just a 5 versus a 12 seed. St. John's is going to run roughshod over them. Listen, Rick Pitino is going to get these guys ready for this game. Rick Pitino is going to talk up Northern Iowa like they are the 1999 San Antonio Spurs. So get ready for a matchup. And we got to talk about it. We got to get everybody ready. I mean, how many people are tuned into Arch Madness? And, well, that's exactly what Northern Iowa run. They made a pretty historic run in their conference tournament in the Missouri Valley Tournament. And they called it Arch Madness. Pretty cool name. Northern Iowa was the 6th seed in the tournament. And in order to make the NCAA tournament, they had to win their conference tournament. And they did so. They won 4 games in 4 days to win the championship. They beat Evansville 68-59. They beat Illinois State 74-52. They beat Bradley 73-69. And then the University of Illinois Chicago for the title, 84-69. This is the first time in 10 years that the Panthers are in the tournament. Here's something that's really impressive. The Panthers from Northern Iowa, they only trailed for 34 seconds in the entire MVC tournament. Does that sound familiar? Do you remember what St. John's did? They never trailed once in the Big East tournament. So really cool stuff there. All right, the game is at 7:10 p.m. It's in San Diego. Your St. John's Red Storm are coming into the game as the Big East Conference champs, the Big East Tournament champs, and again, winners of the last 19 of 20 games. This is St. John's 3rd time in program history being the 5 seed. The last time was 1982 and 1993. St. John's has a record of 2-2 as the 5 seed. So if you want to think about it, let's think about it from the St. John's perspective. I mean, you're feeling a little bit snubbed, perhaps. You know, Rick Pitino's a little annoyed that the fans can't come to San Diego. But listen, you just beat UConn for a second time by 20 points. All right. Everybody was picking UConn all year to go to the Final Four, to be a championship contender, but you beat UConn. All right. They have to feel like they're playing the best basketball right now. St. John's is playing the best basketball of the season going into the NCAA tournament. And for that, you have to be excited. You have to be happy of where they are at. Your confidence is at an all-time high. For Rick Pitino and his bunch, listen, you have to be just feeling really good because it's not how you start, it's how you finish. Now, the 28-6 Red Storm have a lot of work to do ahead of them, and this East region is going to be really tough. They got put in the toughest part of the bracket with elite coaches, tough teams, but that's what it's going to take to be a champion. And, well, who cares if it's not easy? You got to get it done. It's March, right? Buckle up. It's New York tough. Let's get to it. Northern Iowa plays in the Missouri Valley. Why does that matter? Well, first of all, you haven't been watching many Missouri Valley games. And why is that? Because, well, they're a pretty low conference. They haven't played much big games. And the thing is, at Northern Iowa, you're going to be catching them because they haven't seen athletes like St. John's. All right. They weren't great this season, finishing 6th behind Belmont, Bradley, UIC, Illinois State, and Murray State. That's not great, obviously. Now, they have a very distinct style, which makes it really interesting of what is going to happen in this game. You got 2 very contrasting styles. St. John's, very fast, wants to play physical, but quick. Northern Iowa, the exact opposite. And so it's going to be really important for St. John's to continue the trend of what they have been doing in the Big East tournament. You got to start on fire. Against Providence, they started on an 8-0 run. Against Seton Hall, it was a 9-0 run. And against UConn, it was a 10-0 run. If St. John's can put the ball in the basket, it sets up the Pitino press. That press will force a team like Northern Iowa that turns the ball over less than 10 times per game into making quick decisions. Northern Iowa is slow. I'm not talking about slow. I'm talking about slow. Really slow-paced team. They are the 4th slowest tempo team in the country. They want to grind it out. They want to take the air out of the ball. They want to make things happen with 4 or 5 seconds left on that shot clock. So on every rebound for St. John's, they got to run. They got to get out into transition. So what are you going to see from Northern Iowa? You're going to see the pack line defense, all right? They are really good at protecting the rim. That's what the pack line defense does. Tony Bennett, Hall of Fame coach from Virginia, that's what he was best known for. It helped lead Virginia to a national championship in 2019. So what are you going to do? They want to stop St. John's from getting to the rim. They want to stop the penetration off the dribble. What you're going to see is 3 or 4 guys in this kind of square motion around the paint. You're going to see, think of a semicircle from the free throw line down to the bottom of the baseline. All right. That's kind of the area where you're going to see a lot of movement. It's almost going to look at times like a zone. The goal is to not allow penetration. Passing will have to be very crisp, and the shooters will have to be ready for kickouts. So Josan Sannon, Oziah Sellers, Ian Jackson, Lefteris Leotopoulos, all you guys better be ready to let it fly. Here's what's going to happen. They're going to double Zuby Ejiofor. I'm pretty positive of this. They're going to double Zuby. So his passing out of the post is going to be really important. We have seen teams try this season, not really successful. Do you remember that when St. John's was in Omaha to play Creighton on January 10th, the Blue Jays tried to do this. They would blitz him on every single time he catches it. They were like, all right, we're not going to let Zuby beat us. But what happened? Well, he only had 12 points in the game. But he had 6 assists, 5 in the first half. And until that point, that was probably the best first half that St. John's played. Why? Because it allowed Zuby to kind of be this distraction for everyone. And Zuby was finding Oziah Sellers. He was finding Lefteris Leotopoulos. Sellers had 14 points in the first half on 5 of 6 from the floor. He hit 2 threes in that first half. Lefty had the best game of his season in that game. 17 points, made 5 triples. He went 3 of 3 from the first half from deep. It was one of St. John's best shooting displays of the year. 12 of 23, good for 53%. Zuby's passing has been elite this season. He leads the team in assists. So if you're going to get the ball down to him and you're going to try and not let him beat you, he's good enough that he can get the ball out left and right to everybody else. So the shooter's got to be ready. Zuby Ejiofor is going to have his passing tested, but he's been great at that all season. So excited to see how that turns out. Northern Iowa allows the lowest transition rate in the country. They are not a great offensive glass rebounding team. In 18 road or neutral site games, they rank as the number 9th defensive team in the country per Bart Torvik. Important. Listen, this is a team that does it with defense. So what are we going to look at? Who are the guys that we need to really key in on? There's 2 guys that I'm focused on. First is Trey Campbell. He's a 6'4" point guard, but he's not really a point guard. He's just their lead guard. That sounds familiar to you? He has been playing the point for them, but a really, really solid player. He's been on fire in their conference tournament. So look for St. John's to really pressure him because he can turn the ball over at times. So that's going to be something that I think you're really going to see him in his face. You might see a little bit of switching from St. John's on him because St. John's is going to be a lot bigger than the Panthers. There's nobody on the team that is playing major minutes that is over 6'8". So take a look at that. But shout out to Trey Campbell. He's kind of one of these guys that you want to see on a big stage. He averaged 17.7 points per game in the MVC tournament, scored 23 twice. Gets about 4 rebounds per game, about 4 assists per game. So a really, really good player. The other guy that's really important here is 6'6" forward Tristan Smith. Missed about 4 to 5 weeks during this season, and that kind of really dovetailed their entire season. He's probably their second best player. He's averaging about 9 points and 5 rebounds per game. He's sort of their Dylan Mitchell. Talking to some UNI people, they think that, the Panthers would have had a much better season, probably closer to the top of their conference if he wasn't out for an extended period of time. He's back now. Northern Iowa went 21-6 with him in the lineup, 2-6 without him. So look for him to get to the rim a lot. He's going to put the ball on the floor. He's going to drive. He's got this tendency to put his shoulder down, and then he's just going to hit a spin move. So that's kind of like his go-to move. So watch for that, a little bit of bully ball to in the MVC tournament. So keep an eye on it. He averaged 9 points, about 6.5 rebounds, really solid player. The team averaged about 7 made threes in the MVC. So that's what we got to look for. Here's the big note, though. They've been off for a really long time. Their championship game was on March 8th. It's March 17th when I'm recording this. They still haven't played. So could there be a little bit of a rust, or is it rest? Let's see how that plays into things. They haven't played a power conference team all season. Let me say that again. The Northern Iowa Panthers have not played a single power conference team all season. Now, whether that's because they couldn't get somebody to say yes to a game or whatnot, I don't know. But that just means that you haven't really been battle tested. Let's get to some more important numbers. They have the number one defense in the country when you talk about points allowed to an opponent, 62.1 points per game. They're third in the country in opponent three-point percentage at just 28.9%. 362nd in tempo. That's the fourth slowest, as I mentioned, while St. John's is tied for 41st in the country. And regarding tempo, it's essentially taking the possessions away, right? Deep into the clock, and that's not how St. John's wants to play. However, at 0.98 adjusted defensive efficiency, it kind of basically translates to 1 point per possession. So the 62 points per game translates coincidentally to the 62.1 that they also give up. Now, let's get to how that affects St. John's. In games where there have been less than 67 possessions, St. John's is 7-1 this year. If you take Northern Iowa's 62 possessions, add them to St. John's 69, divide by 2, you get a 65 average. So let's look at the games where St. John's had about 65 or less possessions. They're 3-0. You want to compare them to anybody? I would probably say Seton Hall. So take a look at how we played against Seton Hall. It was a 5-point win at the Garden. We beat them on the road in their gym to win the Big East Conference, and then another 10-point win in the Big East Tournament. So tough game, close game, but again, better athletes on Seton Hall. So I think that there's a big advantage there. St. John's has shown that they can play and win slow. If you look at the non-conference opponents, Iowa State and Vegas, there were 69 possessions and St. John's lost by 1. Against Auburn, there were 67 possessions. St. John's lost by 84-74, but obviously, again, much different level of athletes. Both of those were in Las Vegas. Kentucky, 69 possessions, 78-66. We know all about that game. Let's go to a non-conference opponent, Harvard. There were 68 possessions. St. John's won 85-59. In conference against Creighton, 67 possessions. St. John's won 90-73. That's an important game in this Northern Iowa matchup. As I mentioned before, that's kind of how Creighton played St. John's. So look for them to maybe try to mimic that game plan. St. John scored 92 points against Butler. They beat him by 22. There were 62 possessions. That's the exact number that you're looking at in that game. Seton Hall, 64 possessions in that game. They won 65-60, as I just mentioned, in the Big East Tournament. The 72-65 win over Seton Hall, that was 64 possessions. In the Big East Championship against UConn, there were 63 possessions. St. John's won that 72-52. So what do? How do you beat them? You got to speed them up. You got to change the game. You got to flip the switch. You got to press. You got to press. You got to press. You got to get them into live ball turnovers. You got to get into transition, and off the rebound, you got to run. Dylan Mitchell is going to be really important in this game. That's where the win is. The win is going to be from your athletes taking over and overpowering Northern Iowa. Northern Iowa hasn't played anybody in the realm of St. John's. The best team that they played this year was St. Mary's. They lost that game. The other two great games that they played, and I'm putting great in air quotes, it's Belmont twice. They lost both of those games. They played and lost to Valparaiso, and they only scored 44 points. I say that because Valparaiso stinks, and scoring only 44 points against them is ridiculous. You're playing a team that has such a different style. It is very, very different than what you're used to, but they're also going to be shell-shocked, I think, at what St. John's is. They're going to try and take you into the deep waters, but St. John's can't allow that to happen. That's why I brought up them starting fast, because if they start fast and put the ball in the bucket, they're going to press. And if you get that press going, then you're going to be able to take them out of their game. In quad 1 and quad 2 games, Northern Iowa shot just 33.3% from beyond the arc. They're 72 in net and KenPom. And let's see, against seven top 100 teams, they went 2-5 this year. So it's not great. Again, this is a major step up in talent and athleticism for them. In a 5-12 game, why are we talking about this? Because there's a lot of times in these bracket conversations that you talk about the sexy upset. Well, I don't really see that happening here. What I'm curious about is there's a big size advantage for St. John's. And I mentioned the physicality. In the Big East tournament, we saw St. John's impose their will in the conference. They've imposed their will, physicality. They've gotten to the line a lot. In March Madness, you often hear about the whistle being tighter. You're going to hear that a lot. So how does that get officiated? Does that play into things? We'll see. St. John's has won this year despite not shooting great from three, not taking a bunch of them, and really not being inside the arc great either. But they still won because of their defense. They create extra chances, they dominate the glass, and they get to the free throw line. That's been the way that St. John's has won this year. And they're playing their best basketball right now. It's a recipe for success for March. It's a recipe for success for the big, big dance. Since February 1st, St. John's has the best defense in the country per Bar Torvik. And well, the four-man combo of Ozai Sellers, Bryce Hopkins, Dylan Mitchell, and Zuby Ejiofor is one of the best four people on the court in college basketball. They've been absolutely phenomenal. Through the first 16 games of the season, that four-man lineup only played 14.5% of the team's possessions. That sounds pretty familiar to you guys, right? You remember the big change in where everything switched. It was when Dylan Mitchell started to get on that court more. And well, over the last 18 games, the increased usage is 37.9%. In the last 18 games that all four of them are on the court together, St. John's has performed equivalent to the best defensive team and the third best overall team in the country. That's how important the seniors of Bryce Hopkins, Dylan Mitchell, Zuby Ejiofor, and Ozai Sellers are when they are on the floor together. When they are together, they have played like the third best team on offense and the best team on defense. Pretty damn good. The Johnnies are going dancing, fellas and ladies and kids and everyone that's listening. Get your dancing shoes on because Friday, it's the tournament, man. I'm so jazzed up. I'm ready to go. It's the first time since 1999-2000 that they have made the dance in back-to-back years. Yes, that's sad, and yes, that stinks, but hey, Rick Pitino is here, and hopefully for many more years, and, well, this all is part of the rebirth of St. John's. Last year, St. John's won its first game in the Big Dance in 25 years with its largest margin of victory in the NCAA Tournament. Man, they really gave it to Omaha. We won't talk about what happened after that game, so here we go. St. John's holds a 28-32 all-time record in the NCAA tournament. The Red Storm have advanced to 9 Sweet 16s, 6 Elite 8s, 2 Final Fours, and finished as an NCAA finalist in 1952. Our head coach, Rick Pitino, this will be his 25th NCAA appearance at his 6th different school. He's 55-22 all-time. And, well, he's made it to 3 Final Fours at 3 different schools, Providence, Kentucky, and Louisville, and he's got multiple national championships. Listen, I talk about there's always 12-5 upsets in March, right? Well, I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to get your bracket out. And you can feel free to pick Vanderbilt versus McNeese, Texas Tech and Akron, or Wisconsin versus High Point, and you could pick one of those because it's not going to be UNI over St. John's. It's just not going to happen. Let's quickly talk about this East region, and let's talk about this path. And let's talk about some hypotheticals, and let's get crazy. Northern Iowa versus St. John's is the 5 versus 12. Assuming St. John's wins, there's a likely second-round game against Kansas and Bill Self, who should beat Cal Baptist in their first game. Boy, is there going to be tons of storylines there. Zuby Ejiofor versus his former team. Rick Pitino versus Bill Self, 2 Hall of Fame coaches that have won multiple national championships. Darren Peterson, one of the top 3 picks in the NBA draft coming up. All the storylines around him. How does he do against St. John's and their defense and sticking Dylan Mitchell on him? Got to be crazy. After that game, let's say St. John's wins that. they would await probably Duke, who should take care of Siena and either Ohio State or TCU, but that's going to be a great 8-9 game. If St. John's gets this far and somehow can get to Washington, D.C., well, that game against Duke would have a lot of Red Storm fans at it because it's a lot easier to get to Washington than it is to get to San Diego. A potentially hobbled Duke, who's going to be without Caleb Foster and led by All-American Cameron Boozer, could see some scenario where, hey, Zuby Ejiofor versus Cameron Boozer, Mitchell, and Bryce Hopkins against all these amazing talented Duke players. That would be really, really fun. And well, if that fairy dust from the committee sprinkles and St. John's could somehow beat Duke in the Sweet 16, well, a fourth meeting against UConn could potentially await. That's right. The UConn Huskies are in the same damn region as the St. John's Red Storm. The Huskies were given a 2 seed. They are on the other side of the bracket at the bottom. But listen, a lot has to happen for this to occur. UConn will have their hands full in the second round, the third round as well. I anticipate UConn to beat Furman, but I expect Mick Cronin and his UCLA Bruins to beat UCF, and that's going to be a tough game for UConn. UConn versus UCLA in the 2-7 game is not going to be easy. UCLA is hot right now. Michigan State will either play Louisville or the most desired coach in the carousel right now, USF's Brian Hodgson. Look for Syracuse or Providence to try to sneak and steal him away. But USF, I think, is going to beat Louisville, actually. And I think that sets up a really fun game with Michigan State. So if UConn gets past UCLA, which I think is not a given, that would set up Izzo versus Hurley to play St. John's in this scenario. And well, if you somehow, by some crazy notion, get St. John's versus UConn for a fourth time, well, that would be a game that sends somebody to Indianapolis and the Final Four. And well, how sweet would it be for St. John's to beat UConn for the fourth time to go to the Final Four? Wouldn't that be something? Well, it's St. John's and it's Northern Iowa. It's on Friday and it's in San Diego. The 5 seed versus the 12. 7:10 p.m. Eastern, 4:10 p.m. California time. The tournament is here. The Johnnies are playing. And well, that's all that matters. So my prediction, St. John's will establish the Pitino patented press defense. They will submit the Northern Iowa Panthers. The Panthers simply will not be able to handle the size, athleticism, and physicality on both sides of the court. Sorry, guys. It's the Johnnies' time. 74-50. That's my score prediction. And well, let's get ready to dance. Johnny Nation, I am so excited that you are here. Thank you for all the support all year. It was amazing to see all of you at the Big East tournament. And now it's time to keep it going. The season's not over. The mission is clear. Keep stacking wins. Zuby Ejiofor, lead us. Dylan Mitchell, Bryce Hopkins, Osiah Sellers, Ian Jackson, Josan Sannon. It's time. It is time to play for everything. Ruben Prey, Lefteris Leotopoulos, Church Bells, Dylan Darling. Your time. Your time to shine. Sadiku Ibine Ayo, captain of the team. Keep these guys focused. Let's go. Rick Pitino and this staff will have these guys ready. It's number 5 St. John's. It's number 12 Northern Iowa Panthers. It's in San Diego, and it's the East region of the NCAA Tournament. How great is that? Johnny Nation, thank you for listening. I'll catch you next time.